pissing it down, raining. So yes, it is a lovely day outside, but still thank you so much for coming and not just going to the beach or the pub next door and actually making it here tonight. It's absolutely lovely to see everyone. Lots of lovely new faces, which is fab. It's obviously a really awesome session today, so probably loads of people here for Jason. But before that happens, you have to listen to me for a little bit. I'm Laura. I work with Data Cove and I host Brighton Pie. We also have a few other kind of communities and events and things, so I'll talk you through that. Yeah, that's it. Oh yeah, it is. Ooh, okay. Ooh, that's a bit fancy. Apologies, that might be annoying after a while. But yeah, a little bit of housekeeping first. We have got a live stream going on. We have got photographs and videos just for kind of promotion, and feel free to hashtag if you want. If you don't want to be involved in that, please let one of us know. Give a wave of Data Cove people. Thank you. And we will put a big python over your face or something. We'll make sure you're not involved, so that's fine. Oh, and if you could keep your questions to the end, it's nicer just to have the discussion at the end, if that's okay, and no heckling. But Jeremy's not here tonight, as you may have noticed, so there won't be any heckling. Normally there's a heckling about our stats and stuff, so tonight will be a lot quieter. So who are Data Cove? We are a data and analytics company. We help people understand their data. We kind of do three sorts of things. We do process automation and just make your life easier by you not having to do those 53 steps. We will just automate that for you. And we can then focus on customer analytics and marketing analytics. So we can help you find your customers. We can do segmentation. We can do econometrics or media mixed modeling, MMMs, just basically to help you understand who that data, your clients are, and what that data is representing. So how they're interacting with your brand and how you can best engage with them, really. So if you've got any questions about that, let us know. But we also, I need to do it with the, okay. We also do lots of events. Obviously, we're at Brighton Pie tonight with our lovely new logo that we announced last session. So if you haven't already, there's stickers at the back that you can help yourself. I'm the only Python person in the company though, and everyone else does R. So there's a lot of R events that we do as well. We do Brighton R, again with Silicon Brighton, which is awesome, but we've branched out a little bit and we do Bristol, London, Manchester, Portsmouth, I think we're trying to go Birmingham, but yeah, there's a few of them. So we're really obsessed by community and we really enjoy getting out there and sharing with the community. There we go. Absolutely huge thank you to Silicon Brighton and the Eagle Labs. It would not be possible to do these events without them. So without further ado, if I can pass over Andy, he's just going to give you a little bit of background about Eagle Labs.
Thank you, Laura. Hi, guys. Welcome to Barclays Eagle Labs. So for those that haven't been here before, a little bit of housekeeping that we have to go through. So toilets are through the door, down the stairs, and just follow the signs round. You'll find them. There shouldn't be a fire drill today. If there is, follow me. Yeah, I'm going to be in the Joker pub, all over there, and Laura's buying the first round. So there we go. So let's hope, fingers crossed, we have a drill. No, I'm joking. I'm joking. Okay, so Brighton Eagle Labs. So this is us. We are here. We are a business incubator. So we will help and support businesses grow and scale. That is what we want to do. We want to make your business grow and thrive and be successful. The way that we do that is we offer mentoring, and we also offer some accelerator programs as well. So all of that I've just said is free. Yeah, so fill your boots if you fancy a bit of mentoring. Yeah, we've got 65 mentors on our books. We've also got, I think it's 9 accelerator programs that you can join, log on. Some are 12 weeks, some are 6 months. Yes, yeah, so they're quite intense, but they're only for an hour, 2 hours a week. Anything that you feel that you want to do, come and speak to me. Yeah, we can sign you up to Eagle Labs. Once you're a member of Eagle Labs, you're a member for life. Yeah, all the time you've got your business and you need that help and support through mentoring or whatever, or just even to chat something through. We are here to help and support you. But get in contact. I'm here. Little flyers on the desk. If you want to know a little bit more, you can see them, little yellow cards, and get in contact and I'll help you. Thank you, Laura.
Thank you very much, Andy. And we've got Charlie, who's normally you'll always see him stuck in a corner, but tonight I am demanding that he come centre stage and tell us a little bit about Silicon Brighton.
Can do. Are there slides as well? Oh, look at that. They're there. How good's that? I've got my slides and everything. Hello. Yes, I'm Charlie. It's nice to meet you all, for those of you who have not had the pleasure before. I work with Silicon Brighton, and we are the hosts of Brighton and Hove's tech community. We support over 30 different meetup groups across the city, including Brighton Pie and Brighton R. And all the events that we run are accessible to people at all levels. They're all free and they're hybrid. So thank you for coming in the room, and hello to anybody who's watching us on YouTube as well. And top tip, if you're in the room and you want to watch it back, go to YouTube. When you're done, you can see it all again. All the work that we do wouldn't be possible without the help of our amazing supporters, who you can see here. If there's a company who you know who might be interested in supporting us, please point them in our direction. That'll be really appreciated. And I want to give a special thanks and shout out as well to Octopus Energy, James Chase, Hyperion Dev, and the University of Sussex Business School, who are our sponsors, and they all play very key pivotal role in enabling us to do the work that we do. And all the work that we do would not be possible without an absolute army of meetup organisers and volunteers and guest speakers. And you know, the trick to running a community of people is the people. So if you've got any interest in maybe helping out in running an event, talking at an event, helping us with getting everything set up and packed down beforehand or afterwards, maybe you know somebody who'd be interested in supporting us, please do come and chat with myself or share what we're doing around. We'd really appreciate it. These are our values. I'll let you read through these whilst I'm talking. But the most important thing is that if you feel these aren't being upheld in any of the work that we're doing, please let me know as soon as you possibly can. You can also see all the work that we are doing on our socials. We're at Silicon Brighton on everything on the internet. And we've got loads of events at the moment. We've got so many events in July. It's so good. Is that 4 next week? That's ridiculous. That's so good. Yeah, we've got loads of going on. 4 next week is nothing. We're doing 5 tonight alone. It's brilliant. We're doing loads at the moment. It's really good. JavaScript Brighton on the 18th of July. So yeah, if you want to go to the Walrus later on and carry on networking and drinking, you can go down there. Then jumping into next week, we've got the AWS Brighton user group, Brighton Cloud, Brighton AI, and Game Dev Drinks to wrap it up on the Friday. It's all going on. And we're also marching in the Pride Parade again this year, which is so good. I'm so pleased that we did this last year, and I'm so pleased that we're doing it again this year. And the best thing is, if you would like to join us, you can. There's a sign-up link in a few different places. I believe there's one on the Brighton Pie meetup page. So if you would like to join us, then go there, check it out, sign up and come through. We'll be there on the day. And if you're just going to watch the parade, look out for a very excited me and my van, which will be looking beautiful. Can't wait. If you're not in our Slack community, what are you doing with your life? Scan this QR code, get yourself in there. It's the best place to network and engage with a variety of people across the network, and stay up to date with all of the fantastic stuff that is going on across the city as well. And that's me. Thank you very much. Have a fantastic night.
Thank you, Charlie. Yep, Silicon Brighton are just amazing. So if you're not involved in them or you don't know who they are, look that up and get that sorted. Because, yeah, we have this event, obviously, but there's loads of others that might spike your interest, and the community is really pretty good. But without further ado, we're all here to hear from Jason. So I'm going to hand over and he's going to explain everything he's going to do. Have your phones at the ready. I hear it's a slight interactive element to this, but yeah, thank you so much, Jason.
Thank you, Laura. Thanks, everybody. So, excuse me while I swap slides over. So, thank you very much for the welcome. I am Jason. I am a senior data scientist at the Pensions Regulator, which is just down the road in Telecom's house. And you're pressing the magic button. Well done. So I'm going to talk to you today about greenhouse gases and net zero and climate change, particularly in terms of us as an organization, how we can understand what we emit and contribute to climate change in as much as how we do things as the pensions regulator itself. If you're brave, I have put together a little app which we'll have a look at later on. For 2000 AD fans, I'm calling it Cynthia Staff, and you should be able to get it through that QR code there and have a play with it while we're speaking, or have a look a little bit later on. As Laura mentioned, I've been to Brighton Pi before and to Brighton Art, and they are good fun. Come and meet new people, learn about techniques, learn about how you can push and experiment the different languages and platforms that are presented. And I didn't know there's a Brighton AI group, so I'm kind of interested in that now. You can see from the badges on the bottom, I've worked in a bunch of different places, but I still call myself a bit of a newbie data scientist because I didn't have my first data science job until 2021. So I imagine some of you in the room are doing it for longer than me. But let's start looking at greenhouse gases and climate change and how we can make some estimates of that and have a bit of fun along the way. So if you have your phone at the ready, there's a couple of little questions just to get you thinking about climate change quite generally, and how organizations can do good things and bad things in that regard. So how much carbon is absorbed by a tree in a year? Of course, this is a bit of an estimate. We're ranging from 2.5 kilograms per year up to 100 kilograms. And the brave people voting so far, the unanimity is starting to go. And quite surprisingly, we are very close to a consensus on the value that I found. Obviously, bear in mind there's lots of circumstances about a tree and how it's growing and so on, but on average, one tree can absorb around 25 kilos of carbon in a year. So that's just one tree doing 25 kilos a year, which when you look at some of the figures later on, even though the simulations and estimates, you start to think there's actually quite an enormous task if you want to do climate change prevention, but not change your behavior. Planting more trees is not going to be a solution. So you've all been brave enough to come along this evening to hear me talk. What I'm going to talk about is, in a technical sense, a model that I built to help the pensions regulator understand our indirect carbon emissions. And I'll talk a little bit about what that means in a little while. So I'm talking about emissions reporting, first of all, a little bit about what we do and how climate change factors into our work as a regulator. Then look at the business problem itself and data science problem that I tackled to solve. And then hopefully everything will align and we'll have a little play with my Cynthia Staff demo at the end. Feel free to also go to the repo, clone it. It's a little Streamlit app. If you've never built one before, it's a really nice platform to use, really easy to put an app together. So very good for things like rapid prototyping or demonstrating a proof of concept. So TPR, the pensions regulator. We are the public body that looks after workplace pensions in the United Kingdom. We operate as an agency of the Department for Work and Pensions, but we are separate from them. There are three main things that we want to do. To protect savers' money by making sure everyone follows the law. And by saver, that's everyone who's got a pension, whether they're paying into it or whether they're benefiting from it at the moment. So hopefully everybody in this room will have gone through automatic enrolment or enrolled in a pension, and you are a saver, and we want to make sure you get your money that you have invested. We want to enhance the system through things like market oversight and so on. So you may be aware of the Liz Truss mini budget and the liquidity event afterwards, and that's still reverberating today because the particular type of investment vehicle that was at risk at that point was not something anybody was looking at. So we are changing how we oversee the financial markets. And we want to support innovation to make sure people get the best value for money out of it. So I generally say, when people say, oh, you work at the pensions regulator. No, I cannot increase your pension, but I can make sure it gets paid. That's really what we're there to do. And we're just down the road by Preston Park. So a little bit about emissions reporting and a little bit of nomenclature that it would be handy for you to know. So emissions of greenhouse gases This covers a whole range of different substances, carbon dioxide, methane being probably the most famous ones, down to through ammonia, fugitive emissions from air conditioning systems, and a whole load. These usually get bound up as greenhouse gases and converted into a carbon dioxide equivalent. So I'll be talking a lot about kilos and tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. So that's every greenhouse gas that's emitted by a particular activity. These are then reported by being broken down into 3 scopes, and I've lifted a nice graphic from the National Grid website. So scope 1 is a direct emission that comes from a company or an organization. Generally, if you're burning stuff, so that might be petrol in a van engine, or if you're burning gas in a furnace to heat your office. Scopes 2 and 3 are indirect emissions. So somebody is not necessarily burning something directly, but as part of their operations, they are generating some greenhouse gases. Scope 2 is things like heating, air conditioning, and so on, when you're buying in electricity to do all of that. Dealing with your waste, the amount of water you consume, and so on. And then scope 3 is everything else in your, I guess, your value chain. So typically things like your goods and services, your suppliers, transportation for people bringing you stuff, not necessarily transportation for the stuff you make and sell. So what we're going to talk about is scope 3. That's partly because it's the hardest to measure. And my climate colleague calls it the infamous elephant in the room, because it's big and nobody really wants to talk about it because it's really quite difficult to understand and very complex to measure. Another little question for you. We now know about indirect and direct emissions. Electricity has to get around the country. We're greening the grid at the moment, so we have lots of renewables coming online. But how much power do you think actually gets lost just transmitting it from power station to your plug socket at home across the whole of the UK grid? And unfortunately, the UK is not one of the best countries for looking at how our national grid works, because a lot of it is quite archaic. But there's a pretty clear consensus there. 2/3 of you think it's 8%, and that is the last value I found on the National Grid website. So around 8% of our electricity, which you can imagine is gigawatts, terawatts, just gets lost to the ether, as it were, by moving it around. So maybe building a few very big power stations is probably not a good idea. No. Thank you for joining in. So pensions and climate change. The 2 aspects to what we do. One is the Pensions Regulator. We are a regulator, therefore we need to look at climate change now in the work that we do. Because if we're thinking of the timescales for climate change, we're already seeing some effects, but 20 years time, 30 years time, sea levels rising, so on and so forth. There may not be many assets for savers to collect at that point when they come to retire in the future, because pensions are all about the future. So the very snappily named Occupational Pension Schemes, Climate Change Governance and Reporting Regulations 2021 say that many pension schemes have to report on climate change. So that makes sure that trustees who are accountable for pensions and the schemes and how they benefit savers properly consider the impact of climate change on their own scheme, trying to drive improvements across the pensions industry. But all of this is proportionate to risk. If you're a tiny scheme with not many assets, and perhaps that's like a shopping centre, then climate change is probably not so much of a risk. If you're one of our master trusts, so Nest, Smart, People's Pension, that have got millions of savers, your materiality of risk is pretty huge. Some schemes, the biggest ones, generally over £1 billion in assets, have to publish something called a TCFD report, the Task Force on Climate Financial Disclosures, which is a structured report basically talking about how you, as the scheme's trustees and advisors and so on, look at the exposure of your assets to climate change. Are you generating greenhouse gas? Do you have a net zero target? How are you measuring impact? And they all have to be publicly available. And there's also another document which is even more boring called the Statement of Investment Principles, and that must also include a policy on environmental considerations. And these are all musts. They are not optional unless you are a very, very small scheme. So if you belong to a pension scheme, go away and have a quick look at some of their climate reporting and see if you're kind of happy with what they're saying and what they're doing. We're also an organisation in our own right. So we have people working for us. We have things that we need to do. We provide services. And so therefore we are emitting greenhouse gases as well, just through doing our regulatory job. And so as an organisation, we have said for scopes 1 and 2, so it's direct and the indirect stuff that comes from things like electricity and so on, we will get to net zero by 2030, which is not so far off now. And for everything else, we will get there by 2050, which is a common target for many organisations now, and is the hardest because we can't go away and just plant millions of forests or millions of trees in forests. Scope 1, as you can imagine, is pretty easy to measure. You can collect how much petrol or diesel you're putting in a van, you know how much gas you're burning in your furnace or how many tons of wood. So we're pretty good. We know where that is. We can already take steps, which we have done just by moving office, for example, taking out gas central heating and putting in air conditioning and so on. These can all really big steps, but they make a huge saving in the terms of emissions. Scope 2, we know how much electricity we're using, but how much of that is for people actually doing their work, how much of it might be for the lifts running and stuff like that. So I have a reasonable idea, and there are estimates for things like gases emitted by air conditioning and so on. So that's kind of okay. But scope 3 is very much the hardest because by definition it is indirect. It is somewhere else in the value chain. You do not have a meter by every employee that is measuring quite how much electricity they're consuming or how much heat they need and things like that. Hence our business problem. So really, what are our current emissions? We want to know this. Lots of other organisations want to know this as well. Where can we improve? If we know where we're emitting it and how much we are doing it, we can track progress, and we can also decide what is going to be beneficial and good value to improve the the profile of the emissions that we are creating and the actual quantity as well. So buying renewable energy only, for example. And then, of course, the big question, how do we get down to zero, which is proving to be the more controversial part of how we achieve that. So that's our climate change commitment as an organisation. And we're expecting similar things from pension trustees as well. So our business problem, estimating indirect emissions. So we probably all have mugs at home that say World's Greatest Dad or Jurassic Park or something like that. How many times do you think your ceramic mug needs to be used in order to be better than a single-use paper cup? And by better, I mean better value in terms of emissions through the whole of its life cycle. So being made, transported around, and disposed of at the end. Again, fiendishly hard to measure. You know, a pottery manufacturer probably knows how much electricity or gas they're using to heat up the furnaces and everything else, but then you've got to move it around, probably maybe from China or something to get to here. You go to IKEA, you buy it, you've got to get it home, and so on. Then you've got to dispose of it afterwards. And the last figure is the one that's coming out on top. A ceramic mug has to be used 230 times in order to be better than 230 disposable paper cups from Starbucks or Costa. Which for someone like me who drinks a lot of tea, I can probably get through that in a few months. But I've got maybe a dozen mugs in my cabinet at home, and I don't have a dozen people around every day drinking the same amount of tea. So our problem statement. So Dan, our climate person, came to me and said, look, we're pretty good on scope 1 emissions. We're okay on scope 2, but we really want to have a good net zero target. So we need to understand all these indirect things that are really hard to measure. Can you, A, tell me how much carbon dioxide we are emitting from commuting? So that's our workforce commuting to the office. and from our workforce working from home. So one perhaps slightly easier than the other, but that's effectively the problem statement that I started working on in 2022. We can break some of that down because a company called EcoAct in 2020 published a white paper telling you as an organization how you can start to estimate these sorts of factors. They did it for a bank, but a lot of the principles in there are quite generally applicable. But it's quite basic. It's very much assumptions, guesses, and so on. But it's a great place to start. And so looking at the commuting problem, I can break that down into 3 questions. Where do people live to come to the office? How do they get to the office? And when do they come to the office? And there's numbers around all of those, and there's lots of government publications I can convert into kilograms of or tons of carbon dioxide. Okay, seems a bit more straightforward. Probably happy with that. What about working from home? Well, I probably know the equipment people are using at home. I probably know when they're working at home because they're not in the office. But then, okay, well, heating at home. Well, I know I've got an electric boiler, which isn't particularly good. I wonder what other people do. And then suddenly we're hitting my privacy barrier here, because some of these questions that I might want to ask our entire staffing start to get a bit creepy and a bit intrusive. And it's one thing saying, do you have an extra monitor at home, compared to, do you have children at home? How many? How old are they? How often are they in the house? And you start to think, well, people are not really going to be particularly pleased to answer that sort of question, nor should they be. So what we're going to look at is some of the commuting aspects, and we'll look particularly at this heating aspect of work from home and where I was building my model. Ethics, of course, I've mentioned the creepy word. We want to have a balance between protecting people's privacy and their personal data, but we also have to report accurately, A, because we want to do a good job, and B, because we have to. So we're a public body. There are various duties placed upon us to perform our functions. We're also ourselves analysts, and so we fall under the standards, the government analysis function, and any of the numbers we produce have to be transparent, accurate, not knowingly incorrect, and so on. And against that, of course, there's various pieces of privacy legislation and the C word as well. So we get around that by making some estimates. All of this I'm talking about this evening is an estimate, and some guesses, so assumptions along the way. And I put my little swervy skidding car icon there, where we have particularly broad assumptions or guesses in there. I'm trying to balance out the privacy part here as well, as negotiate with our people team to get some information about our staff. So doing things like making sure I only get partial postcodes when I want to work out distances. All the data is anonymized. It's in many cases aggregated. Also telling people that we're doing this and why we're doing this. And we also did a survey, which I'll touch on a little bit later as well, so that people are aware of the context, why we're interested in measuring emissions, what we hope to get from it, and why we're asking sort of questions about what people do at home. So let's looking at the commuting part first of all. Any questions before I start talking about the exciting topic of commuting? No, people are still moving, so they're obviously not dead or asleep. That's good. Did that work properly? Let's try that again. How do you travel to your workplace? Just tell me in maybe one word how you get from your home to your workplace if your workplace is not your home. Someone's unemployed, sorry to hear that, particularly if it's not by choice. Someone's working at home, which is very nice, so I guess you just walk from the bedroom to the spare room or the kitchen or whatever, which sounds like my kind of job. Okay, a lot of people are talking about traveling sustainably. So there's some carbon zero activities in there, such as walking and cycling. There are some of us like me who get the train, and buses out. Oh, the big lemon, like a big lemon. So that's good. It's really quite encouraging that people in the room and people voting are thinking about how they get to work and choosing sustainable options. Thank you. So if we think about how I want to estimate the carbon emissions from people getting to work, I can sort of boil it down to two particular parameters. One is the actual gases emitted from some method of transport per kilometre. That's really easy to find out. The government publishes tables on this every single year. Okay, nice, I can do that. And there's the harder bit about working out how people travel to the office and therefore in total how much distance they are travelling. And so several components to that. So the Pensions Regulator has hybrid working. We don't have to be in the office every day. But we do need to know who's in the office for things like fire safety and booking a desk and all that sort of thing. So I'm fairly confident that I know how many days people are in the office. I say people, I mean it's some ID number. I don't exactly know how many days my colleagues are in there. And I can also monitor our car park because we have to book a car parking space. So that's a pretty good indicator. And it's anonymous enough for me to be happy around protecting privacy. Distance, don't know. People don't go around saying, yeah, I live 12 kilometers away from the office. So I need to go and ask our people team to tell me something about how far away people live from the office. So that means going away and getting more information. It's not something I can easily get hold of. And then the travel method, how do we get to the office? Again, people don't wander around saying, I got the bus this morning. I usually get the train. But every Thursday I drive because I have to pick up my kids. And again, there's no easy source of doing this short of asking people or guessing effectively. So 2 parts is pretty straightforward. These 2 parts are rather more difficult and my methodology changed from year to year, but we'll have a little bit of a look at that. So I know how many people are in the office each day. These are 2 financial years, 22-23 and 23-24. 2022-23 in purple, we had 32,000 days in the office. So that's a person having a day in the office. It was coming out of COVID and people sort of getting back used to working in the office and starting hybrid working again. And financial year just gone in the lime green, considerably higher and going up as well. So pretty confident I know who's in the office and I know it's increasing for a variety of reasons, which means our commuting cost is going to go up. Getting to the office, this is where now sort of starting to do some more data wrangling. It's a bit more interesting, a bit more sophisticated. I can get a linear distance from part of a postcode and I know where the office is. We can see the median value, so that's 50%, halfway through the data set, is just over 18 kilometers. So most people who work for a company in Brighton live near Brighton. That's great. And then there are some outliers who are living in a sort of Cheshire, north of England and Scotland, who have, well, I imagine a pretty hellish commute within that. So these are linear distances. Anybody want to make a suggestion about how we can go from a linear distance to a real world distance? Sorry? Yeah, exactly. So some kind of multiplier. Yeah, I want some kind of scalar value that I can easily just apply to all these linear distances to get an approximation for a real world distance. So I'll talk a little very briefly about how I did that. Survey car, because partial postcodes. So a postcode can be a handful of letterboxes or it can be a village. The curve factor, I didn't know when I started this. I didn't in fact realize I'd have to have a curve factor. So this converting a linear distance here into a real world distance. So somebody very loosely pointed that out in the review process. So I had to go and look at that. And then of course, if you're the 800-kilometer commuter, maybe you aren't doing that every day. Maybe you're staying somewhere in a hotel, friend's house, whatever. And so starting to make assumptions now about people who travel large distances. They're clearly not going to be doing it every day. So added a near arbitrary cap on the amount of distance. that they were travelling. How do we get to work? We saw earlier, most people are travelling sustainably. Train featured a lot, and then bus and bike. When I started estimating this in 2022, we didn't really have the opportunity to survey our staff. It's quite complicated, it's expensive, has to fit in around other surveys that the organisation wants to do. So I was asking myself, how can I estimate commuting methods? So I could go and ask people myself. Okay, I get the train. My colleague Matt cycles. Alyssa, I think, probably gets the bus or walks. Is that really representative? And then we're back to the whole survey problem again. So tell me if you think it's a good idea or not. I went and had a look at the census results for Brighton and Hove city area. And broke distances down. So on the left-hand side, there are some bins of travel distance, and along the horizontal axis, there are some different modes of travel, and the more yellow the blob is, the bigger the proportion. And that effectively boiled down is that virtually everybody drives, unless you live less than 5 miles away, in which case you're probably walking or maybe getting the bus or also driving. So this is how people were reporting in 2021 that they were getting to work when they lived in Brighton and Hove. So you can see there's a lot of assumptions here. A, not everyone may live in Brighton and Hove, and therefore the census result isn't reflective of them. And B, I'm randomly allocating these now to people because I don't know who they are and I don't know how they get to work. So well, one might say that looks a little biased. What we were able to do is to go and survey our staff at the beginning of this year and actually ask them, how do you get to work? And a pleasing 44% of my colleagues did answer that. These aren't the actual survey results. I should say at the beginning, I can't give you the actual numbers because they haven't been published yet, but I wanted to be able to. So what I'm giving you is sort of hints about it and some results from the simulations that I was running. And this is a lot closer to how the survey results came out because, funnily enough, all the proportions are the same as the survey results. So we can see shorter distances towards the top. Most people are walking or something similar. Some people are driving or more people are taking the bus or are cycling. And as the distances increase towards the bottom of the heat map, it's increasingly consolidating around driving or taking the train. So actually very distinctly different from the assumptions I was making in 2022. So it was an overestimate of our emissions because of that bias that we can see there. So I know when people are in the office. I know how far they're traveling. I can convert that into a real world distance by multiplying it by 1.3. How did I do that? I used the open source route API as another advantage using Python to put in one postcode and another postcode, and I know the linear distance between the two from the Ordnance Survey data, and I can get a driving distance between the two. So that gives me a 1.3 curve factor, and my colleague Alyssa validated that for this year as well. So that gives me the right-hand part of that equation we looked at earlier. So our total commute for the office, which is, as you might imagine, in the millions of kilometers, with still some assumptions in there, partial postcodes, etc., etc., etc. What's left is the travel mode. And so I can't remember which government agency it is, one of them has done a whole load of journeys around the UK and has measured the emissions in a very complicated way for all of these different types of transportation. So I know the actual emissions value. So this is now the left-hand side of my equation. I can get the distance because they've told me what it is. So it's Bristol to London, Croydon to Wimbledon or something, and a bunch of others. There's 24 different ways of getting there. There's a difference apparently between a large diesel car and an average diesel car and a medium diesel car. I don't know what any of those actually are. But I can start to aggregate that down very neatly. And that effectively gives me an emissions factor. So if I allocate someone a mode of transportation, I know how much carbon dioxide they're emitting per kilometre. Hence, we're back to our equation again. So transport mode. Little circuity design there is because I had to do all of this stochastically. So I didn't know who was in the office. I didn't know where they lived. I didn't know how they got to work. So I had to make all of those assumptions and randomly assign all of these different parameters to each member of staff within that. Hence, the model was run a number of times. But I know the transport mode. I know their total journey. I know the emissions from their method of transportation, so I can get to an answer. And this example from my demo app that you can use. So this example of a company that has 1,000 staff and has high car usage, and people live up to, I think I've set 100 kilometers away from the office. And you can see the emissions just from commuting are colossal. Over 2,000 tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. You now start to think how many zeros you have to add on the end to get the number of trees that would absorb that amount of carbon in a year. So this is why offsetting will not necessarily work. However, if your staff, like us here, are much more aware of their impact and they're able to take other forms of transport, you can drop your emissions quite dramatically, even if everything else stays the same. So the distance from the office, number of people working, how many days a week they go to the office, you can see that's dropped by 40% just by people taking the bus or the train instead of driving. So there we are, that's the commuting. Any questions? Oh, yes, please, Richard. I should give you the microphone, shouldn't I?
Okay. So you've got diesel and petrol in there. In 10 years' time or so, that's supposed to be removed out from new car sales. We're going to be, what would the effect be if you, in say, 25 years' time, all those diesels and petrols have gone to the scrappy?
That's a neat little question. Yes, fuel cars are going. Hybrid cars, electric cars presumably will fill that gap. What that means is that even with an electric car, you don't have direct emissions, but you'll have indirect emissions. Now, I think the phrase is well to tank. So what's emitted by someone digging the oil out of the ground, converting it into petrol and delivering it to a pump. There is still a cost for that for electricity. And so we should see emissions drop, but then the temptation might be to use the car more. And so those indirect emissions are starting to go up again, plus the demand on the grid to charge all these cars up. So we don't have electric charging points in our office yet. Maybe we might get them in the future, but that'll be for a handful. So interim solution maybe, but should be better, should be better. So you haven't fled from the door yet. So let's talk about working from home. So if I want to reduce this back to an equation again, how much are people emitting? Okay, I can get conversion factors again from the government that come out every year, talking about the energy source and the consumption. The Eco Act report that I used as the model talked about looking at what IT gear people are using at home and their lighting and their heating. So I'm pretty sure I know what they've got at home because we have an inventory from the IT folks. I know how often they're using it for because I can calculate hours worked. And I'm pretty sure how often they're going to be using it during the working day. So pretty confident with that. Green tick, but swervy car because I don't exactly know who has got how many screens and which laptop and so on and so forth. Home lighting, oh God, this is getting really boring now. How often do you have the lights on? What sort of light do you have? What sort of bulb is it? How many watts? How often during the day do you turn it on? So let's keep it simple, stupid. The Eco Act white paper has a blanket flat assumption, 6 months of the year, 10 watt light source. Okay, everyone does that, fine. Heating is the more knotty one, partly because it's vast amounts of emissions. How often do you have your heating on? Well, how many months in the year do you use it? What do you set your temperature gauge at? Do you use radiators? Do you have direct heating? Is it gas? Is it electric? You can start to see the trouble here now. How many rooms do you work in? How often do you share them with other people? How big are the rooms? Do you have really good insulation? who's interested in any of this and who's willing to give me, 20, 30, 40 answers to get a decent answer? So that's by far the knottiest one there. Don't know anything about it. Privacy icon here again, starting to get really, really intrusive now. So we are back to our old friend assumptions. But tell me, thinking about heating now, what you might use at home if you have heating. And if I gave you the business problem of saying, okay, give me a value for what people use at home, how much energy they're consuming for heating, what sort of parameters do you think would be useful to understand? Yep, good. Thank you everyone for contributing. This has got some really good questions here. How big, how many, how much in the house or the building? What sort of source of heat are you using? What type of heating, what temperature, times throughout the day? Good point, your income will affect how often you turn it on. So does that mean people who are paid more might be more liberal with their heating? What else? Things like insulation, single glazing, difference between summer and winter. Some people may have to have the heating on all the time, perhaps because of a health condition or having children and pets at home. Some people may not have heating at all. Some people may live in a wonderful, super modern house that doesn't need it. So good. You're all thinking the similar sort of parameters that I was thinking about when I was looking at this problem. So thank you very much. So as we've just worked out, trying to understand people's heating at home is actually really complex, because this is how people said in the census they heated their homes. Most people, 74%, use gas. And then there's a whole load of other really awkward stuff. No central heating, a mix of different types, a communal heat network, and so on and so forth. And the type of building. Okay, in England, most people live in a house. In Brighton, in the lime green, most people live in a flat, and most of that stock will be converted, or will be probably quite an old original build. Not that many people will be living in a nice, modern, well-insulated house. So you can immediately see now we've got maybe a dozen variables on the left, maybe 6, 7 variables on the right. We need to navigate a way through this, plus all these other questions that we asked ourselves just now. When do you have it on? How hot? How often during the day? How many rooms do you have to heat? How often do you share it? What heating fuel do you use? So at this point, you can see why it's now estimating, and where we have to use the power of Python to model all of this using a limited amount of data that we can get. So just as an example, if we took a flat rate approach, here are 2 different regimes. On the left, people have heating on for 6 months of the year, 10 hours a day. Most people work 70% of the time from home, and a third of people share with someone else. So their portion of the heating goes down. On the right-hand side, same regime, except people have it on for a couple of hours a day. And you can immediately see that there's a nearly 3-fold difference in the amount of energy you need to consume for your entire workforce just to heat the house. And so this is one of the real advantages of doing a survey of our staff, to ask some delicately phrased questions about people behave at home. But you can see it's quite a complex picture, actually. Some people have the heating on for the whole year, some people for the winter, some people something else, like maybe on demand. Most people have it on for a few hours, some people have it on for more than 8 hours, and so on. So it's not an easy picture to try and unpick. So this is the approach that I took. So I used my NumPy random number generator, and I assigned a fuel from a very limited list to each member of staff, so gas, electric, or something else. That led me to a base allocation of 4-point-something kilowatt hours for gas and less for other fuels. I then factored in the other things that I knew about from the survey. So this is assuming our survey respondents are the same as the whole staffing complement, how often are they sharing, when are they using it for, how often, da, 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 da. I know how many hours, I think I know how many hours people are working at home. Let me just all multiply it up to get our heating emissions at the end of it. But because I'm starting randomly here on the left, and some of these are random allocations as well, I need to repeat the model any number of times to get a reasonable overall estimate. And trying to navigate this path between giving you real numbers and numbers that aren't published yet, so I can't tell you what they are. This graph shows the percentage of the median value for heating. So 900 and something staff, all with a heating allocation, model run 20 different times. And you can see that most people are around, most of the results are pleasingly within 5% of the median. So the median is at number 1, and most results are hovering around it. And you can see there's one allocation that's a little bit below. So that's good. That means even though it's a random allocation underneath, it's working reasonably consistently, and it's clearly taking account of perhaps this low side when people don't have the heating on, or the higher side when people do have a lot of heating. And reflecting what we saw from that national census graph earlier, gas in red forms the vast bulk of people's heating emissions. There is a very thin line for electricity and other stuff, and then the lime green is other fossil fuels, so things like wood and coal. My parents live near Brighton, they still use coal for all of their heating. So we're getting some nice matches with what we've seen sort of nationally from whole nation figures, as well as taking into account what's happening in our survey. So bring it all together. Finally, he's talking about some Python, they say. So my friend Panda and my friend NumPy, taking the stuff I'm pretty sure about that I've got from good sources, then bringing in some stuff that has a few assumptions in it, and our flat rate, and some other sort of random allocations, putting in some of that reference data from the government, and then running the model a number of times. The hard part, as always with these things, is wrangling the data and getting it all together. And I can run the model 20 times in minutes. 20 was a fairly arbitrary number on my part. It seemed fairly fair. But from that, I get my average emissions. And by bringing all those data sources together, I can arrive at a number that we can use this year and next year and the year after and the year after, and hopefully we see our downward sloping graph. This, you probably won't be able to read this, but if you look at the colored blobs, this is the actual flowchart for the work from home emissions part of it. And you can see there's 4 different data types, plus our conclusions at the bottom, and this is running a number of times, and it's all very complicated. And I started to get lost in the middle, and my colleague Matt had the plum job of reviewing my code before it went into the repo. So that's how complex it became. Overall results. This again was one of those median graphs here. Again, even with random allocations, most of the data is within 5%, if not 10% of the median. We can see there are some especially high commutes here and a couple of especially low commutes here. This is probably because someone in the survey said they fly to work. And so that got multiplied up across the whole of the workforce. So I suspect here we had 2 or 3 people flying quite substantial distances. And here, maybe we had nobody flying and people doing a lot more walking and cycling. Nobody cycled 800 kilometers, I have to say. I did put caps in place. So nobody walked more than 10 kilometers, nobody cycled more than 30 kilometers. If you cycle to London every day, sorry, you weren't in my model. So there we are. Python, why? Well, you might be able to see already, I like Excel as much as the next person, but I'm not a real whiz at it. And I thought this was really rather too complex to try and manage a whole bunch of spreadsheets and different columns and so on. And even thinking about trying to do it in some kind of Power App didn't seem really work very well. So I've got stochastic components in this. So stochastic means it's going to be different every time you do it. 918 staff, so you can start to see how the data points start to multiply. Numbers of office visits, numbers of this, numbers of that. I ended up doing 29 data frame joins, and my output to make sure everything was working correctly, it was over 910,000 rows. So I struggle to see how I would do that in Excel. And Python's great. So this is all really smooth because I don't need to do anything fancy. I could just use pandas and NumPy and Plotly to get nice graphs. Some of the data I have to get through an API. So car park bookings and desk bookings and so on, use an API to grab that information. Checking the distances for real world distances all through APIs. I can do everything in one place if I'm using one Python codebook. I'm not doing some of the calculations in Excel. Then I've got to go to a computer. Then I've got to get some data. Then I've got to join it back in Excel. So it seemed much easier to do it all in one place. Of course, we're a public body. We're subject to the government analysis framework standards, so things have to be reducible, transparent, understand what they are. My colleagues who are not data specialists, but are climate specialists, need to be able to understand where these numbers come from and then intuitively feel, does this feel right for this kind of organization? And of course, I can annotate the output and get any number of sexy graphs. Have to go through peer review because that's good practice, and I want to be able to reuse the code again and again and again. So to me, that all boils down to a very neat business problem to solve with Python, maybe R if you like, that sort of thing. Bit about the future, some questions that we couldn't really arrive at a sensible answer about, and the guidance is a little bit hand-wavy. What about consultants? So people we bring in for particular tasks. Should we look at their emissions as well? Are they scope 2? Are they scope 3? What about temporary staff? One of my colleagues made a good suggestion. If it's really hard to get accurate data from our people team, maybe they could do a lot of the matching. And so can I push some of my processing sort of upstream and they give me the aggregated results, and I don't really care who's done what, and I can be more confident that it's more accurate. So that's a conversation I've got to start having later this year. Multiple nodes problem, which sounds far more grandiose. It's like, okay, it's nice day today. I'm going to cycle to work. Oh, it's raining today. I'm going to take the bus. Oh, I'm running late. Oh, my other half can be lifted in the car. And then suddenly the estimate for how people get to work becomes A, far more complex, but B, we want to be able to be accurate. So I want to take into account people who have other modes of transport. And I'd like to take the assumptions out or reduce them where we can. Python, I'm told, is an object-oriented language, and I didn't do any of that. I was very naughty. I was just joining data frames and stuff like that. I wasn't building classes and writing modules and all the rest of it. So perhaps next time that might be better, to see if we can take advantage of what Python has to offer and make sure the model is flexible if we want to take into account other changes or other measurements in the future. So finally, we come to SynthyStaff. There's got to be a better name than Indirect Emissions Modeler. I'm reading a lot of Judge Dredd at the moment, so it seems perfect to call it that. So if you're feeling brave, that QR code should lead you to a streamlit.app where you can have a play. You can be the CEO of a company up to 1,000 employees. You can dictate how many times people come to the office and how they travel there. And you can choose how they heat their home, and you can get an impression of how that changes your carbon emissions. So I should be able to go to it. Right. Have I done that right, Charlie? Yeah. Lovely. So it's a little bit fiddly. This is my first Streamlit app, by the way, but I can heartily recommend it as a platform. So please feel free to steal the code and reuse it. So you have three main areas that you can choose from. So staffing, so that's the people who work for you. Commuting options, how do they get to the office? And then work from home options. So what are they doing at home when you are not watching them? And there's some basic instructions in there because I ran out of time to write a decent guide. So if we look at staffing options, I'll put some fairly arbitrary numbers in here. If you're confident with Python, you can change these yourself. And we can say we might want a workforce of 857 and maybe not very many of them are part-time workers, but I'm quite a harsh boss, so I want them in the office 40 hours a week. And you can start to see the allocations changing on the right. And this will give you a running total of how much work you're getting out of your staff, so to speak. And each one of these boxes, when you click confirm, that will make the kind of headline figures appear on the left. Sometimes they disappear, but if you just click a confirm button, they will come back. then we can start modeling some other stuff around. So how far away from the office do our staff live? So 1 to 100 kilometers, that feels like it's probably London or maybe the other side of London. That's great. You can choose how often they're in the office. So maybe, again, I'm quite cruel, so they've got to come in twice a week. And you can choose kind of the closeness. So do they live mostly very close to the office? And so our peak is within 20 kilometers, or in fact, do they live quite far away? And you see the peak here is much more towards the right and the higher travel distance. And that will update your commuting distance. And then you can pick how they get to the office. So do we want to see lots of driving or no driving? Lots of driving. Right. So we can do that. And nobody's walking because it's raining all the time. There we are. And where's our office? Southeast, southwest, England, Scotland? Northern Ireland. Okay. Because the mix of cars differs from region to region, and about who's using diesel and who's got electric and how big it is and everything else. So, right. So using those options, your 892.3 full-time equivalents are emitting nearly 3,000 tons of carbon dioxide a year just getting to the office. Because you're really mean and you're making them drive. Actually, you're making them drive. And then work from home options. So what are they doing when they're not under your watchful gaze as their inspirational leader? So you can pick and choose how many people have got laptops versus desktops, because desktops use more energy. How many have mobile phones? I include that because we have some company mobile phones, and there's an appreciable amount of the workforce have them, so I have to include them. But not everyone will have a company mobile phone. And if it's a personal phone, you probably don't need to include it because they're not really using, unless they're using their personal phone for a lot of business. And then you can control their heating. So what proportion of people have no heating? I put it there. And how many people just have heating on during the winter? We can put it there. Most people, okay, they have to heat the whole of their home. And nobody's sharing with others because I don't believe in people sharing. I click our confirm button and hopefully, will this work? Yes. Down the bottom. Your workforce emits just over 3,000 tons of carbon dioxide per year, carbon dioxide equivalent, for just getting to the office and when they are working from home. That is a small proportion compared to your actual direct emissions, so how much electricity you are consuming in your office. If you have vehicles, how much fuel is being burnt in your vehicles and so on, how much water your business is consuming, how much waste it is emitting and so on. And if you click download log, every single time you change something, that adds a row in a little data frame and you can get a little file out at the end. So that is a little toy for you to play with and just to understand how your organization's policies can affect your emissions and therefore whether you're going to have an easy or a hard journey to net zero. And I think my last slide really is, yeah, just a thank you. There's a QR code again for the demo if you want to have a look at it. If you're interested in our climate strategy at TPR, the Pensions Regulator, that page will take you to all of our climate reporting and why we're interested in it. So thank you so much, everyone, for staying here, listening to me and not running away screaming, and people online as well. I will take your questions.
Thank you so much. That was incredible, like mind-blowingly, slightly depressingly incredible, but really, really good. Does anyone have a question? Yes.
Thank you for that. I work for a ESG fintech company, so it's nice to see the carbon emission and stuff. My only question is, when you're choosing the work from home option, you have things like IQ equipment and heating. Won't it make more sense because even when you're in office, you're somehow using all of them as well. Like you're not using your computer when you're in office, so that kind of cancels it out. And also the heating part, like your home. For a lot of people, I'll assume that there will be heating on even if you're not at home, because they're living with someone else of their family. So
That's exactly right. So there's two aspects there. This is calculating our corporate emissions for our staff when they are working for us. So we're only interested in this particular model at their emissions from working at home, because their emissions from being in the office we can measure directly and will be scope 2. So we've got an electricity meter, we've got a water meter in the office, so we know how much electricity they're using. The more difficult part, as you mentioned, is if you are not at home, you're still emitting carbon and so on. We don't include that because that's not when people are working. There's also a challenge there about what about people who are consultants and so on, and how do we measure their carbon emissions when they're working for us, but they may not be working in our office. They might be working somewhere else. They might be working somewhere overseas. So in this case, we're only really interested in what people are doing when they are working for us.
okay, thank you. That makes sense.
But feel free to extend the model and start adding in emissions from the office and stuff like that. Alice.
Hi, yeah, I was wondering what the outcomes of the study have been for your company. Like, have there been any changes of policy as a result of what you found? Or what do you expect to happen in the future?
Yes, so we have our 2 key dates for our net zero. So 2030 for scope 1 and 2, 2050 for everything else. What this work does, and the real model is rather more sophisticated than the one you're playing with, it gives us a number so we can track our progress to net zero now each year until we get to 2050. So that's why we have to report it, which we should be doing next month, along with a whole bunch of other climate stuff. But we now have insight as an organization, which we didn't have 18 months ago, into carbon emissions from people driving and so on. So, okay, can we get people out of cars and onto another form of transport? How can we do that? Subsidized public transport, better connectivity, charging points for electric cars, free bikes, things like that. So we can now ask meaningful questions that we couldn't before because we're just guessing about it. As an organization, we've moved office. We're in a better office that is more modern, and already changes have taken place. So when we moved into the office, it had gas central heating, so sort of bloody radiators. People opening windows and stuff like that because it's too hot or too cold. We now have more fancy air conditioning type units, which means in winter, the heat is being pumped in rather than out during the summer. So we don't need our gas central heating anymore, which is uncontrollable and everything else. We're only now using electricity, and we can get green electricity. And we've seen with direct emissions, we will see a substantial drop. We won't see that next year because we're not moving office again next year. But just by being more well informed about what we're doing as a business, and then what our staff are also doing, we can start to identify most things that are going to be most beneficial or deliver most value, which without these sorts of numbers, even though there are any estimates, we didn't have before, and we can't show progress.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Hi, you've just had a record-breaking strike, went on for months and months. Have you factored that into it? People just not working for a certain percentage?
Yes, is the answer to that, because the people analyst gave me an aggregated number for the amount of hours that someone is working in a month. So that's their contracted hours minus all the absences, whether that's business travel, training, industrial action, anything else. So I can estimate when they're in the office, and when they're not in the office, I'm assuming they're working from home, but because I have that total hours figure, I can factor in any number of absences. So as well as the industrial action, of course, there'll be people who are ill or have maternity leave and so on. And so without knowing who they are, I can still factor in the effects of their absence.
And how significant was the industrial action? Would it be good for the climate if we all went on strike?
In terms of climate change, if you're not working, you are therefore not consuming electricity in the workplace or at home and doing emissions. If you're not working, maybe you're doing something else, like you're playing Minecraft or you're watching a box set of something or streaming until your eyes bleed. So may not be as good for the environment. I'll leave it at that. Might be a bit controversial otherwise.
Anyone else?
How was this received by the specialists within the organisation?
So I'm sure you didn't enjoy having to read through all the code and check it. But Dan, our sustainability lead, was very excited about it because he didn't have any of these numbers beforehand. And what it has done, it's enabled him to have more meaningful data supportive arguments with other leaders. So, okay, you've got a bright idea, you want people in the office more often. Well, actually, this is how much carbon we're emitting just from commuting. You will increase that. You will make our job harder to get to net zero if you want people in 8 times a month, 10 times a month. It's also given him the leverage to be able to say, well, actually, we need to buy in now some other expertise. We need to have a better way of measuring our travel. We need to have people who can advise us on getting people out of cars and onto bikes. We need to maybe stop doing some stuff that's not beneficial. So by having numbers that he can talk about that's been through all of that peer review process and reviewed and checked and agreed, he can say, well, this is actually going to be a concrete change. This is why you need to make the change. You want to get to net zero. This is where we are today. You now have to do this and this. So as far as I know, generally very well received. Maybe the chief executive was a bit annoyed.
In terms of like commuting, have you ever factored in any business trips and stuff?
That is a very fair point. In this one, no, simply because business travel would be scope 2 emissions, so indirect, but a part of operating your business. And the Pensions Regulator, almost all of our business travel is booked through our system that generates like bus tickets and train tickets and so on. And that can give you a value for your carbon emissions for that particular journey. And so Dan can grab all of that and he knows roughly how much carbon is being emitted from all of our business travel. I don't know how they do cars, because I don't imagine the inspectors walk everywhere if they're going to Manchester to do some of their work. Whether that's going up or going down, I don't know. And I don't know how we would make it more sustainable, though, because inspectors have to travel to any part of the United Kingdom. They're based in Brighton. How are they going to get to Glasgow to do inspections? Well, maybe train, probably fly, definitely not drive. So that will be an increasing problem because it would just become harder to make that more sustainable and harder to offset.
Anyone else got a question? I'm sure you're going to stick around for a bit. So if anyone does have kind of any thoughts or comments, they can come and chat to you. You'd be happy with that?
Please do, yes.
Lovely. Fabulous. Well, thank you ever so much, Jason. That was incredible. Well done.
Thanks for the opportunity. Thank you.
Right. Sorry, I'm going to nick this. You can relax now. Sit down. I'm going to go back. Can I go back to my one? There we go. Oh. Do something. Okay.
Anyone know where the don't start from current slide? Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, so thank you very much. That was really, really awesome. Really, really exciting. I loved your word clouds so much so because you mentioned you were going to do a word cloud. I went and did a word cloud this week as well. So I want to show you my word cloud. And you might have noticed I've been really good at not mentioning something so far, but I'm going to have to mention it now. It's not working. Oh, there we go. Woo! Earl, we've got Earl is back. And if you haven't heard us talk about Earl yet, where have you been? We are banging on about this. It is only about 6 or 7 weeks until Earl, what is it, you may say? It is a big conference that we have decided to take on and run for our communities and kind of go a little bit wild. It's actually the 10th year it's happening. And we've decided to take it over, bring it down to Brighton, because we know we've got an awesome tech community in Brighton. And we're very much looking forward to it. So if you would like to join us, please do. But what is it, you may say? So it's all about kind of enterprise applications of R and Python this year. I determined we would add Python in there. And basically, how do you use R and Python in your work? How does it benefit your work? So things like this talk tonight, sorry, I thought you were there for a second still, would be incredible for it. So yeah, we've got, there's flyers everywhere. That is kind of a better Earl thing. Is that not working? It's not working. Okay. Do you know what? I'm going to show you another QR code in a little second. That's our link tree that hopefully should send it to the right place. But yes, we do discounts. So if you are in government and charity, student or academic, we do discounts. And I am going to give you a discount tonight if you're in the room. So I'm going to wait until the live stream's turned off because I'm really sorry, people at home, but you ain't getting it. Okay. I'm sure you can look elsewhere, and maybe if you explore the internet well enough, there might be some discount codes out there, but I'm going to give everyone in here a discount code later. So if you wanted to come, that would be amazing. It's a 3-day event. Our first day is workshops, and then we've got 2 days of talks and lightning talks and keynote speakers and everything. And we are sponsored by Posit, our consortium, and Ascent, who used to run it as well. So it's very, very exciting, especially as these are our keynotes. Now, as a Python person, I didn't actually know who some of these people were, but apparently this is a big deal. In R, like, this is the daddy of R, basically. So we're very, very excited about that. We've also got our local Andy Field, who's incredible. Apparently he turns up to lectures dressed as Harry Potter and makes rock music on stats. So I'm very excited to see him because I really hope he does something very fun, but we'll be very happy with whatever he does, of course. And then we've got the amazing Christelle Swift from the BBC and Steph Locke, who's just tech superstar from Microsoft. So these are going to be really, really amazing things to watch and listen to. But yeah, if you go to the website, there's all the people who are speaking. We've got 42 speakers. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be really, really good. So there's my word cloud. Look, I did a word cloud. Normally I just analyze numbers. So I thought, yeah, I'm going to kind of do some words. So I took everyone's talks from all of our speakers and I put them in a representative word cloud. So tell the people next to you, what word stands out to you the most? Go. What word? Pipelines. Oh, it's not Luigi and Mario. It's going down the pipe. I hate pipelines. Ooh, smooth, nice. Anyone? What are you most interested? What stands out? And you're like, what? What is that? Dog. Yeah, that's quite massive. You'll have to come and find out. No, we do have a number of people from the Dogs Trust coming, so they are obviously talking about dogs. Yeah, it's quite large. Obviously, we've got a lot of Shiny and R and stuff like that. But look how big Python is. We've got loads of Python happening as well. For its first year, we're not at a 50-50 split, but we're pretty much there. So I'm very excited about this. But yes, there's all these things is going to be happening, and we're also having an evening event in the i360. If it's running, then I know it's not this week, but it definitely will be running. It's going to be like a little bit of a champagne reception and kind of some networking and stuff. We'd love to see all of you there. I know a few people are definitely coming already, and we've got a few chairs and hosts in the house. But But yeah, so that's that. Sorry, I will stop talking. As a company, we also run training courses. So if you're interested in learning more about R or Python and you want to have a look at our training courses, have a look on the website and you can kind of see we do loads of different skills, or we can, if you ask for one, I'm sure we could write one for you and do some courses. And this, hopefully, this link tree should work and this will send you to everything. I'll leave that on the board for you. We're around now for a little bit. There's possibly some more pizzas, there's some drinks in the fridge, but then what we'll do is we'll head next door to the Joker. And if you want to just continue to chat, the sun is shining. It's now freezing in here, Andy. The air conditioning is really working. I'm looking for my cardigan, but outside it'll be glorious. So yeah, if you want to just head next door and continue the chat and keep on going, it'd be really awesome. But otherwise, thank you so much for coming out tonight, and it's been great to see you.